All right, here we are, episode 24 of the Everyday Bow Hunter. Once again, my brother Dan Zemer. I'm Mike Manley. Well, Dan, 2 weeks since the last one. I have to say, episode 23 really did well. Up almost 4,000 views on YouTube. It's really doing well.
Yeah, that's good.
If you didn't catch that last episode, after you watch this one, go back and watch that one. It was a good one.
And if you ask me, there was nothing more special than the other ones. So go watch the other ones.
Yeah, watch them all. Watch them all. Yep, we're just trying to load up on subscribers before the season. I'm just kidding. All right, since the last episode, done a bunch of different stuff. Been getting out, really hiking a lot. In fact, yesterday I got to hike, even though I was planning on doing some electric biking because we forgot to take our keys with us after we drove an hour to go to the spot.
Yeah, that's incredibly funny.
That's great. That's some real smarts right there. But we had a nice hike, went out state game lands. If you didn't see the YouTube short that I did, showed a rope bridge out in the middle of state game lands in Dauphin County in PA. If you know anything about that, let me know. I'm curious. I'd like to know why they have a rope bridge there. One guy hopped on, made a comment and said something about possibly being for firefighters. I'd like to know. Shit's like brand new and sitting out in the woods.
Yeah,
I'd like to know why people would leave that there. Trusting, that's trusting a lot.
I mean, if it's where it leads to, could be an area for controlled burn, stuff like that.
There is a sign about a water tower there, so that's a possibility in that area trail. So that's a possibility. Yeah, we went out e-biking today and had another mishap. My son had a flat. At least I got to figure out how to take the back tire off of an e-bike and unplug the motor and stuff. That was interesting to learn. But now that I know it's not a big deal, we're on it. So anyway, put those stuff in the tires now called Flat Out in the tubes. Yeah. That runs in there, so it assists you and helps you, minimizes your chances of getting a flat versus, especially with the rough terrain we're going to be on hunting this season. Some of that area, some of that area is tough.
Oh, I was getting, when I went out to top of the mountain or whatever, the bouncing, it kind of reminded me of my four-wheeler racing days type stuff, getting arm pump. That was kind of happening.
That's hard on your hands and forearms after a while. That can be
like that, and like all that bouncing, you kind of messes your vision up, and it's almost like every time you get off an elevator, you get that woo. Like that's the same thing when you get off a bike after riding like that. You're kind of
that worries me a little bit about bouncing my bow and sight around.
I get it.
There's part of me just thinking I might just put my bow on my back.
Yeah.
To minimize that when I'm riding out.
That's smart. Yeah.
I'm only going to do it, a handful of times anyway. It's not like that's the primary way that we hunt anyway.
Right. Right.
Most of the places we go, you don't have the opportunity to just take an e-bike to it. You're going to have to hump the woods and hump the mountain. That's just how it is.
We have pretty designated areas that we hit that historically are good for us, and
So I had a couple questions, and it leads into kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about kind of the anatomy of a hunt, and we're going to do it from tree stand hunter perspective with me, and we're going to do it from a ground hunter perspective with Dan. We talk about, the question I got was, so you found a spot, you say, okay, I did my scouting, I did my homework, I now found a spot. What's next? And that was pretty much the question. And I think the guy's name was Dan, actually. So Dan from, oh my God, I can't remember where it's from, but I'm sorry. Anyway, Dan, I apologize. We'll do the best with this question we can, but I think there's a lot that goes into that. While that's a broad question, from the time you pick that spot to the time you hunt it, there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, that's a pretty loaded question. It's a good question. And, we have the time to kind of get into the loaded part of it. So, like, for me, being a ground hunter, all right, so let's go in theory. I've located deer. Let's say I have a camera up and I'm seeing where the deer are. Now I'm trying to, along that path, just because that's where the camera is doesn't mean that's where I'm hunting. So along that travel route, okay, I'm going to first identify the travel route. And then from that point, I need to find, as a ground hunter in Pennsylvania, the thickest of thick. So I need to, how do you say that? I need to
provide cover concealment.
I got to hide my silhouette.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to be silhouetting yourself.
Right. But in the same breath, now this is where the challenge comes in, is I think tree hunters are at a bigger advantage here where I'm not. There's only so many thick spots to get yourself covered, to find an ambush spot, to find, that natural funnel or whatever. It's a little bit harder for me because you have plentiful trees that you could probably have more, more options there. But so what I'm saying is,
if it's an open area and there's only one little spot, and that could be the spot where the deer's coming through that's thick, it's harder to find it. You might have to work your way farther away from where you identified where the deer from originally, backtrack it. Direction of movement's huge with that.
Yeah.
You got to figure out, okay, where can I backtrack this trail to a reasonable point where there's still sign that I now can set up it.
Yeah, and then sometimes you can find a spot and then you start range finding to your point of impact, and it could be 45, 50 yards, and now you're like, okay, well, this ain't going to work. I don't want to be shooting those distances. I want to be in the 20 to 30, 35 range, within my comfort zone. That's what I've been training for. I don't want to go outside of that and, make a mistake or,
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So for me, finding the ambush spot. So you have your deer trails, let's say running east to west, I depending on wind, you want to be north or south of that, and time of day, because your thermals are going to be pulling down or pulling up the mountain with that. So a lot of this goes into that. Okay, I'm doing it, let's say a morning hunt, sun's going to be coming up, warming up, pushing up, and thermals are going to be pulling up the mountain, all depending on a calm day. Let's just say hypothetically. So I'm going to find that thick stuff. For one, with the camo that I'm using, I'm going to utilize that, my scent control, but I'm going to get myself tucked into the thick stuff. And I don't want too much in front of me because I don't need deflection of my arrows on twigs and stuff like that. But I also want it close enough that it's hiding my silhouette.
You know what, I wanted to ask you about this. So when you're at your tree, right, and you have like a tree seat that you use, right, and then you put the little blind up in front of you too, right? So do you ever say,
this is a really good question. I know where it's going.
You ever say to yourself, okay, I'm going to be on the side of the tree, and my primary place that I want that deer to come from is to my left, so I can kind of be comfortable sitting there to my shot? Because sometimes straight up from your chair is not always as comfortable as like to your strong side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With the bow.
Yeah. Okay, so
bow, rifle, crossbow, whatever you're using.
My setup, what I was kind of talking about was more of when I set up with a blind, that style, finding the thick. Now, if I'm using my seat that clips onto the base of a tree and I'm sitting at the base of the tree, I'm trying to find a double tree or two trees very close together. So I'm utilizing that tree in front of my tree that I'm sitting on kind of as a shield. And then I put my little stake blind up around that one. And it's kind of given me a little buffer area within.
How high is that blind?
27 inches, but it's telescopic. So you can go up to, 32.
So how much of your body you think's exposed above that when you're
probably about from here up,
chest up,
mid chest up. Yeah. So, but I'm definitely trying.
How far out in front of you?
Well, it depends on how far away that second tree is.
Okay.
So that second tree, I'm actually trying to pick a bigger tree than the tree that I'm sitting in. And that bigger tree, I'm kind of doing this and looking around it. And I utilize it. I actually, 2 years ago when I killed that buck, it was this exact same scenario. He was coming across and I kind of got myself behind the bigger tree.
Just like
and as he was coming, I kind of kept moving behind that tree where I was in his blind spot.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate ambush, is being in their blind spot. So I utilize
depth
that
in front of you. And
then that gives you the opportunity to pull up and shoot. And, but
it's the same concept as a saddle hunter behind the tree.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So me hunting off the ground is a new thing for me, because I spent, 13 years or not, if not more, whatever it was, hunting out of a tree, and then decided it wasn't for me anymore. Wanted to hunt off the ground. So technically I'm still learning. That's great. because the more I learn, the better hunter I become. And every year it feels like I'm figuring something else out. And the biggest thing for me that I'm figuring out is if I'm hunting in a blind, I'm getting it into thick and I'm utilizing it because I take my blind out with me and set up on the spot. I'm not leaving it out there. This is public land. I'm not leaving it out there for somebody else to stumble across.
It's not a full blind. It's a portable blind.
Right. Yeah. It's, a rhino, pop out, square hub, or I think they call it a hub blind. So in that aspect, that's where I'm like, we call it dog hair. It's saplings that are all trying to grow and they're all real close together. They didn't get choked out yet. So there's a lot of them. So I'm
usually those areas where you have it's been logged out and now years ago.
Yeah.
And now it's just thick with all the saplings that have come up from that growth spawned by the clear cut.
Yeah.
And that just all those small trees are just terrible.
And that is also a transition point. So if I know that they're coming out of that, they're going to be coming from behind me. I'm going to get a little bit farther away from that, but I'm going to find out where that brush kind of kicks out a little bit more. And I'm going to tuck behind that. So when they come out here, there's like a blind corner right there.
Yeah, kind of an ambush.
An ambush spot. Yeah. So, and that little jut out is kind of the funnel. It pushes them away from it and keeps them on a path. And that's, so yeah, with ground hunting, you have ultimately three different styles. You have hunting out of a blind. You have the tree seat scenario, which is my favorite. And then you also have spot and stalk. And from the seat, you can spot and stalk. From the blind, it's a little more cumbersome because you have a lot more to carry with you and you're going to be making a lot more noise. But from the tree seat, if it ain't working, it's just quick detach, fold it, put it on, and go. And I have utilized that to no success because again, we do our scouting. We know where these animals are coming through, and I like to, what do they call it, pod hunt. I like to sit on them areas, and if I'm not successful, it's because it's just not my day. And you're going to have those days.
And it seems like that you and our dad are hunting the same way like that a lot. Yeah,
Dad, that little, I call it a curtain, putting around me, he took that information and he kind of went a different route and went higher with it. And, well, he's also 6'1". He's a lot taller, so he needed to go higher with it. But he's doing it a little bit different, but almost, it's hard to explain. It sounds silly, a little contradicting, a little different, but exactly the same.
Yeah.
He is putting his in a V because of he was hunting and noticed that turkeys when mine's rounded off, turkeys were spotting him. But when he put it in the V, that same flock of turkeys, didn't notice him just because of the angles.
I think that it's probably creating more of a signature.
Okay.
You spread out and get the big, something unnatural there.
Yeah.
And if you have it angled in tighter, maybe that's the way to go. That's a good point to learn right there. Yeah. Taking, as opposed, creating depth that's not some kind of artificial, thing that we would, even if you see that walking through the woods, that's going to stand out to you right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A blind stands out to you right away. It's amazing how deer, you have to, they always say you need to put it out in the woods a few days or even weeks before you hunt so that they get used to it there. So because initially they might be spooked off from it.
I've had several doe come right down past me with my rounded off curtain, and I had a deer look right through me. Not even, like, I thought she was looking at me, and just how she kind of just nonchalantly fed along made me realize.
Were you wearing your hex?
I was wearing my hex. True story. And I was also wearing my Sitka Stratus Optifade.
Subalpine.
No, not sub.
Elevated 2.
Elevated 2. And, yeah, Sitka. We've had this discussion already, but
it's good camo.
It's great. So she looked, I was like, I'm busted. And I thought about kind of giving her the little juke just to get her to get going. And She just looked right through me and just kept on. I'm like, oh, this is great, you know?
Yeah.
No, so it definitely, my setup definitely works. Without a doubt, I had a younger doe come running almost me over, come run right beside me. I mean, not but from here to the other side of Mike, away from me, right beside me. Right, I was wearing Hex that day too. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Like the setup is foolproof. I feel very, 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 very confident in how I'm doing it.
But the one thing about, you said before on the podcast about that ground hunting stuff is movement's not as forgiving. You can get spotted real quickly.
Oh yeah, you can't move a muscle,
and
until they're
you have to, as soon as you see them, you got to be pretty much ready to shoot.
You're either ready, already drawn, because you utilize that tree in a blind spot, or you have to wait until they're passing by you, which gives you that perfect quartered away shot anyway. You know, you have to wait until. I've
heard of a lot of. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, you have to be more. I feel more patient, longer. You know.
Yeah, I've heard several different people talk and podcasts talk about the fact that when they are hunting on the ground, or if they're hunting in the saddle low, like they're only hunting like 6 foot off the ground or something, the saddle, and utilizing that tree just like you're talking about,
right,
to be in front of them to give them that breakup, and saying that, hey, the only shot I can take is either if they're looking away with their head down, I can draw, or if they're walking past me, just like you said, and getting that quartering away shot as they walk past. So that makes ground hunting tough. There's always times I have been amazed at how deer can bust you even up 20 foot high in the tree.
Yeah.
And you're saying that deer's not looking anywhere near me, but they have such a field of view of vision that they can get you.
I was always relentlessly getting busted in the tree because of my fear of heights. I would where my feet were, I had to like look down and make sure my feet were set, and then I could draw, and then I could, and it was because of, for safety reasons, I was in a panic, and then I'd go to draw, and now I'm out over the edge a little bit, and so I was always being busted in that aspect.
At least you switched to this and you're a lot more comfortable and been successful now.
It's a different challenge, and I love it.
Well, that's great. So from my perspective, right, when we talk about anatomy of, once you find where that deer is, and Dan said a great point that I think I talked about on a previous podcast too, is when I put trail cameras out, right, I'm putting them in a spot where it's open enough that I can see the deer, I can get good shots of them, I can see their direction of movement and all that. I am not putting that in a place to hunt, because the spots that I'm selecting for hunting is going to be, just like Dan just said, ambush point, place where it's thick, where their movement is channelized, where they're restricted as much as possible. It's not always possible where you hunt, but I've hunted a lot of places where it's so restricted that I might only have a very small window
or two
to get them because of that. And some spots are just like that. And I've been like, man, I'm screwed. I can't take a shot now, and just watched them walk out of my life. But the whole thing is finding that spot that allows you to get a good broadside shot based on their movement. 20 yards is where I set it. I look for it. It's not always optimal. Like you said, you can't always get that tree that's 20 yards from you. It's just not always going to happen, especially the right size tree. You can have some big ass tree or some really small tree that you can't hunt out of, but you got to find, I'm trying to find a tree that gives me that few extra seconds, right? That broadside and or quartering away shot, like Dan's saying, and get me in a position where I can do that. Once I find that spot, the very next thing that I'm doing is also what Dan said in the beginning of this, is now I'm looking at what wind can I hunt that on? Is it got to be an east wind? Can I hunt it on is it a west wind? And can I hunt it northwest wind? Is it possible for that? And then I got to say, just like Dan said, what are the thermals and how are they going to affect that? Right. So even when you're getting ready to go out to hunt, so I say, okay, weather forecast is great for tomorrow. I got a west wind. You get up in the morning and everything's blowing east for some reason, and you say, okay, I can't hunt that spot now. Right. So you got to look at it like that.
And it's okay to give up on a spot because of weather. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. But, and then the other thing you have to look at is timing thermals. And I talked about this a lot, is everybody will tell you thermals rise in the morning and they drop in the evening. Well, that's absolutely true. But what time?
Yeah.
So you have to look at your weather. You have to look at the temperatures, when those temperatures are going to change, because that's when once the sun heats the air at the bottom of a valley, and this is really specific to hill country or mountains. And so that time could be as late as 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So different parts of the season when you get that early, when the sun's, when you're like the sun's up by, 6:30 in the morning, that might be
7:30, 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
them thermals are pulling up. Yeah, absolutely.
So you just got to look at that.
Later in, like towards rut, it's longer. It's like 9:30, 10 o'clock.
I had an afternoon spot that I couldn't hunt because damn thermals weren't changing. It was heading on 4:30 till they started dropping on me, right? So I was like, you got to look at that stuff too. If you hunt hill country or mountains like we do, they can be a pain. Always remember, thermals are stronger on clear days and less strong on cloudy days because, of course, you need the sun to heat it up and all that. But anyway, good. I digress. So you look at that stuff and say, okay, you put it in your little memory bank on your Onyx app or whatever, in your journal, whatever, and you say, okay, that's when I can hunt that spot. Now, what's my access?
Yeah.
How am I getting to that spot without blowing that spot up along with the winds, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be downwind, right? And use that to get to that spot and not minimize. You're going to cross, and where we're at, you're going to cross deer trails. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a.
You just gotta, like Dan always says, don't touch stuff. Have gloves on. Minimize when you're going through brush. Kind of bring your arms in.
That's kind of my biggest. That's my biggest rule of thumb. Sorry,
wear rubber boots. All that stuff.
Is when you're walking in, and you got twigs in front of you, don't be reaching out breaking them and stuff like that. For one, they're gonna smell that fresh break, and that fresh, from the bark and all that, whatever you call it.
That's one thing our dad taught us from the earliest ages. When you
don't touch it.
When you
just
break that
walk
stuff,
around it.
That fresh break, it now created something that deer's understands that somebody went through there, and it's been recent.
Yeah, and then for you, a guy that's climbing, you get up there, this branch is in the way, and you go cut it and throw it down below you. What did you just do? Mm-hmm. No, that's stuff that should have. You know what? If you've been scouting and doing your homework, that's something that should have happened months ago and could have washed off.
I've watched the hunting public guys do this a lot, and I only just started doing it a little bit. I carry 2 different bungee cords out with me now. Is when stuff's in my way, instead of doing that, I bungee it out of the way. And then when I leave, I let it go again, because that one keeps you from making a bunch of noise. When you're breaking stuff, you're making noise, and then you're also sending out a different scent signature.
And you're not harming the tree.
Yeah, and you're not harming the tree. The biggest thing for me is the whole scent control thing, that it's about minimizing your signature. So a dog or a deer, they all have these amazing noses, and they can smell whether you're there or not.
Yeah.
But whether or not they determine you're a threat by how high that signature is. If you haven't showered in a couple of days and you don't like the wipe or something, you
might be a messy person.
You might have a hell of a smell carrying around with you. It might stay there quite a long time.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think people seem to forget too, even if you have the perfect wind and you have your thermals figured out and stuff, with the ebbs and flows of wind, if you could see exactly where your scent cone is around your tree, it's going to be like a mushroom.
Yeah.
Right around that tree, your scent is going to be 360 degrees around that tree or ground where you're sitting on the ground. Yeah. And that's why I think thermals really come into play. If you can really get thermals on your side, like you, Dan, at different times of day when you're on the ground, those things are just dropping straight to the ground, and a deer would have to be right on top of you to smell you. Yeah. And the same thing on the tree, when the thermals are rising, those thermals are, their scent's pulling up and away from you along with the wind, and the chances of getting busted by a deer are small. Right. But what that deer's smelling from you on the ground is a low signature saying, oh, he was here a while ago, but he's not here now, coming in. So a lot of times, but I mean, when deer get sensitive to it as the season goes on, in our area especially, where it's a low deer density area, and as soon as we make our presence known in the woods, they really change their habits. Mm-hmm. And they smell that, and they'll be away from it and won't come back in some instances.
Yes, yeah.
So you have to be really cognizant of that. So when we do scent control stuff, wash our clothes, take our showers, all that stuff that we talk about, we do that to minimize our scent. Wear rubber boots into the woods, wear gloves walking through the woods, just trying to minimize scent.
So for you, anatomy of hunt wise, how is it different? How different is climbing for you before and after the foliage drop? So like hypothetically, before the foliage drop, you can get right to the base of.
Great
What
point.
do you do after that?
Great point. Great point. So there are in the mountains where we hunt, right? Like you said, preseason, when we first go out early season, you have a lot of leaves on the tree. When you're going up, you have a lot of places where you can get a great backstop and you're not going to silhouette yourself, right? Anytime you're up in a tree where you have a lot of space behind you and you're moving around up in that tree even a little bit, man, you're just asking to get busted, right? It's a lot. You're just out there hanging out there, right? A lot of times I will try to tuck myself into a tree where the branches are allowing to be around me a lot. I like to have something really thick behind me, even as you get later in the season then, right? So later in the season, a lot of like your, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, like birch trees and stuff carry their green leaves longer.
Right, yes.
If you can find that kind of setup, I had a perfect setup for that on the power line close to our camp last year. I had a birch tree just loaded with leaves that I was able to nestle in a white oak that was right in there, and then acorns dropping all around it. And ultimately I didn't see a deer, but I thought it was a great spot, you know.
So if you were in the hardwoods and there's not a lot, you know, what are you doing?
Well, now I've changed my methodology about this, because before, and I haven't done it yet, it's a decision I made in the last year.
Currently, yeah.
Right, it's a decision I made in the last year. I have forced myself up into a tree, even though I know I'm silhouetting myself. And I think I've heard like Dan Infalt talk about this. You know, he did this, you know, and kicked himself in the butt last year for doing it. But if you're hard set that you're hunting out of a tree, you know, you're selling yourself short. I think that you lower, you know, you're not lower, but you hunt lower. You don't need to be as high in the tree. Hunt lower. Don't be super high. Get to a point where you have the backstop, right? With a saddle that's a little bit easier, or you just hunt on the ground.
Yeah. Okay.
Or you just hunt on the ground. And I think that, you know, carrying my, I have a little easy blind from Cabela's like you do.
Yeah.
That I can just set up there and stands about 36 inches high. And I have a tree seat sitting actually right here, a Millennium tree seat sitting here that I hope to utilize in areas that I know that are like that.
Right.
But with the saddle, if I'm just out there mobile hunting, you know, looking for hot sign and want to just set up somewhere and I don't have that opportunity, I will just hunt at the base of a tree in my saddle, just be right there so I can be, you know, set on a platform, have a firm platform to shoot from, and then hunt from that. And I wanted to change that because a lot of times, like you said, in previous years, I'd force it and put myself in a tree that definitely was not.
And you're just wasting time at that point.
I'd even hunt a smooth-sided tree, which don't do that, you know, that and feel like I might kick out or not be stable in the tree just to hunt out of a tree. And that's bad to do. I don't want to do that. But I think the bigger things are that you got to really look and if you're using a climber, for instance, right, you're really restricted on the tree that you can hunt from. Yeah. It has to be certain branchless, allow you to get to whatever height it is without fighting branches going up. You can't get around branches with a climber unless they're really small. But then with a saddle hunting, you can hunt in any tree.
Yeah, you can hunt in all kind of weird scenarios.
Do what I said. You know, this is what I recommend, and get in those trees that have a lot of branches if you can, right? To give you that cover in there to conceal your movement, and then use like a bungee cord or something to pull the stuff out of your way so you have that shot window. You might not have optimal shots there necessarily, but it's going to, you know, offer you a level of concealment that will allow you more movement in the tree.
So when you're shooting and when you're hunting with very small shot windows, you're really limiting yourself a lot, because your window of being able to take that animal, okay, so if it's more wide open, I hate saying wide open, when you have a lot more alleys, we'll say, to shoot, those opportunities of something happening within that alleyway, you have multiple alleyways to recover that situation. Where if you only have two small windows, it may never line up right. And that's the risk you take,
it's
obviously.
The risk you take, yeah. And it really depends on the spot. I would say that at least 80% of the trees that I hunt out of, I have, at least, good 9 to 12.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. I have a good window there. I don't necessarily have it at the other places, but I try to focus that 9 to 12 in on the area that I expect or hope deer are going to move through based on the scouting and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do. And I try to do that in a 20 yard. I've hunted as close as 15 yards to the trail. I try to not get too close because those shots up in the tree.
I was actually
when you get the angles, they become more difficult. I shot that buck 3 years ago. Well, whatever, years ago now. That was at the base of my tree, 7 yards. And I shot it down through the back because it was my only shot. Right. And so that's not my preferred shot.
Yeah, it's not optimal. I mean, we've been talking to my buddy Jevin about this, like letting them get a little bit farther away to get that better shot instead of down on them. It's harder to judge exit point, entry point, exit point.
You might hit right where you want to on the entry, but your exit could be shit. Complotedly. You know what? Let's move on. I'm obviously not going to get that out. Totally different. Yeah. It could be, okay, I hit him where, I want to on a broadside shot that would be perfect, but I'm now exiting down through the brisket and it's down and that arrow's in the ground and that deer's running and
you only clipped part of one lung instead of going through both and stuff like that.
Yeah. And now you're screwed. And if you hit back a little bit, it could be even worse. If you hit higher, it could be, higher could be better, but it really depends on that angle. And a lot of times when you're at angles like that and you think maybe you got a quartering away shot, it might be different. You could be way off on how all that comes together. So there's just a ton of stuff that tells you, hey, get myself at 20 yards or more and go with what you're comfortable shooting, right? And think about the angles and the trajectory of your arrow when you're letting loose, and go out there and take shots like that before the season. Get up in a tree, get up on an elevated platform, take those shots and see how that arrow is entering that target and see, okay, if this had to go through, and try to imagine how that arrow would go through the animal and see where that would hit, because that's huge. That's huge.
So I feel like, when we're talking to an audience that's, derived of people from all over the country, our view on this is very myopic because our territory and how our forest is set up and, it's so different, versus, you get out Midwest and stuff and it changes. It's more wide open and this and that. So you have to kind of figure out, your area better than we do and figure out how to utilize what we're saying, but, use it for you.
Yeah. And
I struggled getting that out.
I can only tell you, what I experienced, I'm not going to tell anybody this is how you should hunt, right? All I can say is this is how I hunt.
Yeah.
And this is what works for me. And you got to take that and use pieces and parts. I do all the time. I tell you what, I've listened to, I don't know how many hunting shows, Outdoor Channel, Hunting Public guys, all these different podcasts, and listen to all these different tidbits, and I bring it in and I'm putting it in my mental kit bag and saying, this is the stuff that I want to try out. And when I'm out in the woods, I'm looking for this now where I didn't look for it before and stuff. And I can tell you what, the thing that I think I probably utilize more now, especially since we're in the big woods, especially since like where we hunt in the mountains in Pennsylvania here, buck bedding is extremely hard to nail down because they're changing it all the time because of the winds, right? The thing that you rely on more than anything is those travel routes,
right?
So the thing that I've been focusing on more than anything is historical rubs, where you get into that second week in the season and it carries you through a lot of season. Is okay, this area has been rubbed year over year over year.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And it's not just one or two rubs. It's a line of rubs. It's could go on for a long ways.
Yeah.
And say, okay, what is special about this particular area that there's always getting rubbed like this? Okay, is there always doe in here? That's probably an indicator. Are they always on the trails where those rubs are lined up? You know, what are the indicators that are bringing it back? And if you don't ever even see that, set yourself up off of that, downwind, whatever. Get yourself into a 20-yard area, sit on it, and see what you see.
Observe it,
and say, okay, if it doesn't work out for you, and you just do see some deer, whatever, you now learn something and say, okay, it worked. Just because you don't see deer doesn't mean it's not working. It just means the deer didn't come through that day.
Yeah.
But it's about persistence and historical knowledge. And I think that it probably takes a good, 3-4 years, I think, of hunting specific areas to really get to know the habitat and the deer movement patterns and everything, and feel confident in it, right? And if you can go out and nail this stuff down and kill a big buck your first year out, you're the man. 1, 2, you were very lucky.
Yeah. Like I said in the last podcast, there's always a certain level of luck involved, you know.
Yeah, but I think that the hunters today are way more educated than ever because of all the resources out there.
Absolutely.
You have, you have the mobile apps like Onyx and Hunt Stand and Spartan Forge and all these different apps, and then you have the trail camera technology with the Moultrie mobile stuff. Then you're showing all the technology there that's telling you the moon phase that the deer are showing up on, showing the temperature that deer are showing up on. And has that changed at all for you? Has that still running the same for you?
Yeah, it's weird. It goes like a week, nothing, and then a couple days of activity, and then like 3-4 days again of nothing, and then it's a weird cycle up there. I'll tell you, it's weird. It's odd. I can't figure it out.
It's not coinciding with the moon. It's just all over the place.
It's all over the place now. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Now it's.
I think we're getting closer to season. That might be why.
Here's what an observation. I'm getting more at 8-9 o'clock at night, right at dark photos now.
Oh wow.
Not so much in the morning at all anymore. It's more late in the evening.
So we talked previously about different food sources out there to look for this season. And while I had seen a bunch of chestnut oaks with acorns on them, when I was out doing that hike yesterday in state game lands here in central Pennsylvania, in Dauphin County, I came across a ton of white oaks dropping and having clusters of acorns on them already, small little ones that are still growing, from the storms getting blown down. Saw some stuff for some red oaks as well, just seeing the buds on them.
So did you know all this, or was it because Trevor was with you and he was telling you all this?
I know all this. I am an expert. I know everything about this. My son is just a thing that I bring along once in a while to tell me if I'm
Get
right
the knee-high boots out, y'all. Shit's getting thick. It's getting deep.
Yes, Trevor was with me. Trevor was with me, and he was telling me, I screwed up chestnut oaks and white oaks yesterday. He picked up and said, Dad, look at this. This is a red oaks leaf. We were in a spot along the trail we were on that had leaves falling all down on the ground because of the hurricane Debbie that came through, or tropical storm. And he was picked up 3 different leaves and said, Dad, chestnut oak, white oak, red oak, all were right there.
Yeah.
And that really helped out a lot. And then seeing the buds, the red oak buds that are going to turn into acorns that are coming. So it looks like we're going to have,
pretty good drop again. So we'll see what actually happens. But the fact that we're out there seeing them already tells me that I think we could end up having quite a few acorns on the ground. Okay. Well,
I hope we don't have the massive amount we did
last year.
I'd rather have pockets.
I'd rather have pockets too, because
when you have pockets, you can nail down those travel routes and say, along that travel route that I discovered, yada, 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 there's also a big patch of acorns.
We can say this, but for me last year, I was involved in more almost shooting than I've been in a long time. Mm-hmm. The year prior I got that 8-point, but that was the only animal that I had an opportunity to shoot at the entire season, buck or doe. Mm-hmm. Last year, I had an opportunity, 2 different buck, 2 different doe, 4 different animals. And that was with a massive acorn drop. Was it because I was doing my homework and you know what I mean? Or was it just because they're traveling?
Well,
regardless,
you know, that they do travel regardless. You know, the thing is, if they are in a bedding area during the day, they're going to get up when there's more on the ground. They don't need to move as much. I think the biggest indicator is when you know there's not water near where they're at. You need to also consider, you know, where are they going for water during the day, because they still need water during the day.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the chances are I wasn't hitting it perfect, that they had just decimated that drop and we're moving on to a different one. You know what I mean? It was like, there's no way I timed every single one of those.
It's so hard to tell.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a matter of, because everybody's area is different. And deer are going to react differently in that area and stuff. And we'll see what works out with this acorn drop for sure.
Stuff like that.
Here's a question of the day.
Oh boy.
All right. If they suddenly said that archery season opened tomorrow, would you be ready?
No.
Me either.
Because
my shit's everywhere.
I still got to treat the majority of I did a little bit. I still got to wash and treat some of my clothes with permethrin. I still have like my batteries, knives, flashlights, all that stuff is kind of spread out. Like, yeah, I'm definitely not ready, and I'm thankful that we have 7 weeks.
You know what made me think about that?
What's that?
So I'm going through, I have these bags hanging over here, right? I've been testing out different packs and stuff, and I'm reaching down in the pack, and I pull out, and I go, oh, here's a thing of orange marking tape.
That should be
over in somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm using a different pack. And now, here's my pen that I'm supposed to have on me all the time. So when I fill up my tags, right, that I kept in there. So it's like, oh, crap. All these things that you need to have lined up. Dan just said it great. You know, your lights, your batteries, you know, permethrin, you treating your clothes early season, which we're big on the anti-tick and bug thing.
Yeah.
You know, all your,
we butcher our own deer. I got to sharpen all them knives. I got to make, it's a list. And, that, like, for me, my wife kind of started this with me years back, and it was a checklist, because this brain, when I get close to archery season, I can barely eat. I can barely sleep. I'm a freaking mess because I'm that excited. The checklist keeps me in check.
You know what? I'm glad you said that, because not pre-planned at all. It's a great segue. I have a preseason checklist that I've been putting together. I'm going to finish up what I think. I'm going to hand it to you. You can tell me what you think needs to be added, subtracted, whatever. And then we'll make that available to all our listeners.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, but my checklist and it should be kind of like two different Dan's and Mike's. No, we're both, everybody's different. And they have
for like a ground hunting setup. So this is my checklist.
Yeah. No, I mean, for me, like ratchet straps, like, are they noisy, or like, it's simple things like that. My ratchet straps from last year, I remember my last 2 or 3 hunts going, you know what? Because I hunted in the rain and I didn't oil them. Like, man, these things are really getting noisy. What if you just need that? Your seat's not sitting perfect, and it's wearing you out halfway through the hunt. You just want to lift that seat up just a little bit, and you want that click, click, but you can't do it because your ratchet strap's too noisy or whatever. It's things like that. There's so many minor details that become major problems.
The entire, I have a little car, and it's like hatchback, and the back of that car becomes my hunting, my hunting source. All my stuff's in there. I just get to where I'm hunting. I pull the stuff out, put it on, and go. And I always have that set up through the hunting season.
Are you going to get your balls back, your man card back, and get a truck again? Or I'm just messing with you.
I am.
It's like the worst to call somebody like you, an ex-special forces guy, not a man, because that's a total joke. Well, it's my brother, and I can do that. So,
yeah, true story. I had a Toyota Tacoma. I got a job in Harrisburg from where I live here in York. It was taking me, with traffic at the time, it was taking me like an hour to drive to work every day.
Yeah, it made sense to have the car.
Gas-wise, I was getting I was getting smoked. So I had to go something more economical. The car I have now, Subaru Crosstrek, gets me like 37 miles a gallon, which I'm ready to give it up and go back to the Tacoma. So now with the job I have now, I'm going to be moving to that. But anyway, Dan, I think pretty good podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. We love hearing all you guys writing in with questions and stuff like that. That kind of like gets us firing on all cylinders too, and it brings up good points for us to talk about on here. And, you know, we'd like to thank you for listening and following us. Follow us on, you know, YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, send in some questions.
Yeah. And we've actually, if you've seen on YouTube, you've actually asked a question, you know, we get on there and answer it right away. And we've had a good time with a couple people, you know, recently. So thank you. And once again, from the Everyday Bow Hunter podcast, we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Mike once again. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want even more content from the Everyday Bow Hunter, I invite you to go over to everydaybowhunter.com or archeryhunting.com. It's the same website for the Everyday Bow Hunter. In addition, if you haven't subscribed, go to our YouTube channel. We have a lot more than the podcast there. Have more video coming every day, a lot more content. In addition, if you go over on your podcast channels, or you're already there, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, please give us a 5-star review. Give us a follow. We really appreciate it. In addition, if you see an Everyday Bow Hunter shirt like this, go ahead, go to the website, go to YouTube, click on it, buy one of our shirts. Every little bit helps. We're not sponsored by anybody. In addition, in our descriptions and our show notes, we highlight products that we use and buy that we love. Now, every time you click on one of those links, we get a small commission. It really helps us out. Like I said, we're not sponsored by anyone. You're our sponsor. So with your support, we can make this channel even better. I appreciate it. And until then, I will see you next time.